Well, joining me live now is the South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas. Thank you so much for your time, Premier, this afternoon. I might start by playing you actually some of the comments of the people of Adelaide we surveyed yesterday about the prospect of a COP conference in Adelaide next year. Have a listen to this.
Do you think we're a good place to host it?
I do think it'd be a good place to host it. I understand that Turkey and Australia are kind of vying for it at the moment. But I do think it would be good. I think it would be good for Pacific Island nations, actually, if it would be held here.
South Australia especially has always been in the forefront for the climate and things like this. And I really think we only have one world and we don't want to stuff it up.
Well, South Australia's led the world in renewable energy transformation. For a long time had the biggest battery in the world. We've got the greatest rooftop solar energy. Yeah, great place to have a COP conference. I don't know quite where they'll put everyone. About 50,000 people, isn't it?
Not sure where you'll put everyone. Well, it seems pretty popular, Peter Malinauskas. You must think it's a shame that at the moment it looks likely it's not going to happen.
Well, it's hard to know, Andrew. It seems like we've got this intractable dispute between the Australian government and the Turkey Air government around where COP will be. If I'm frank about it, Andrew, only the UN could come up with such a crazy and inane system where one country has the veto over literally everybody else, notwithstanding the fact that Australia's bid on all accounts has a majority of support. But you know, in South Australia, we put our best foot forward to be able to host the COP. You know, for us, it was the mountain to climb was to win the right to host COP in Adelaide in the event that the Commonwealth was able to win the rights for the nation. So we've done our part and we've put our best foot forward and we're very excited to be in this position, and we hold out hope that, you know, Turkey might actually look at the lay of the land and realise that the majority of the world wants to see a COP in Australia and the Pacific, and the good reasons for it.
Now, it's been reported you actually considered travelling to this COP conference in Brazil. Is that true, and what were you hoping to achieve there if you went?
Yeah, look, I made clear that I was willing to go if it was going to make a difference in some way for the likelihood of Adelaide to be able to host COP, but I wasn't going to get on the plane just for the sake of it. It's logistically a bit of a challenge to get to, and we had a lot going on this week, particularly in South Australia. We had a major challenge over the weekend that we had to sort of overcome associated with the major employer of disability or people with a disability in South Australia, Bedford Industries, and I decided to prioritise that. But I have absolute confidence that Chris Bowen and the team on the ground in Belém, in Brazil at the moment, are doing their level best to try and negotiate an outcome, and I'm very grateful for the engagement that the Foreign Minister, Perry Wong, has had on this matter, along with the Prime Minister, and we'll wait and see, and hopefully, like I said, wiser heads prevail and Australia wins the right to host the event.
Is the price tag that's been reported of $1 to $2 billion accurate in terms of the cost of staging the conference?
Look, I am not aware of any suggestion or official references to that $2 billion figure. I don't know where it came from. I saw the story in the AFR last week and it was news to me. There is clearly a cost associated with it. It'll be a smaller cost than the Olympics, a lot smaller cost than the Olympics. But in terms of the platform it provides, you know, it's pretty much second to the Olympics in terms of the scale of the event, the number of people that would travel to Australia and spend their hard-earned dollars in our local economy. So there's an economic uplift to be achieved. But really, the cost associated with this doesn't represent the value that would be achieved by holding such a significant, geopolitically, geostrategically important event in Australia, particularly at this moment in time in this part of the world.
You said it couldn't be $2 billion. Could it be $1 billion?
Well, I suspect the cost would be substantial because it's a major event. We're talking about 30 to 40,000 people travelling to our country, and there'll be a cost associated with that. I don't have the exact number because that level of detail hasn't been worked through with the Commonwealth, but there would be a substantial expense, and there's no denying that. But I think that cost would be modest in comparison to other major events, whether it be the Olympics. There was a cost associated with hosting G20 when Australia did that last, which had bipartisan support. And I think, like I said, the value well and truly outweighs whatever the investment on behalf of the Commonwealth that is required by virtue of its importance for the country at this point in time.
Is there state government budget provision in relation to it, or are you waiting to do that until...
Yeah,
unless you win it, unless and until you win it?
Yeah. So we've allocated $8 million in the last state budget we handed down in June, $8 million just in terms of coordination associated with preparing in the event that we win it, but we don't intend to expend more than that unless, of course, we actually win the right to have it. So there has been some basic preparatory works that were budgeted for in our state budget in June, but like I said, that was for a relatively modest sum of $8 million.
What do you make of the position of the federal coalition in dumping net zero? Because our Vox Pops yesterday in Adelaide showed a lot of people are in favour of keeping the target. Queensland Conservative government is keeping the target. New South Wales Liberals just voted to keep the target. What do you think about what the federal coalition's done there?
Oh, look, I think it's unfortunate, if I'm honest, Andrew. Look, I respect their prerogative to be able to make their own policy decisions, clearly. But I think it's out of step with the electorate. You know, we just had a pretty big federal election earlier this year and it had a pretty strong result. And if we actually look at the way that result moved, particularly in metropolitan seats around the country, it's almost as though the federal coalition have turned a blind eye to that result. But that's a political analysis. I think what's more important is the policy question and an appreciation around what the net zero commitment actually is. Because what we're seeking to do is to provide the policy certainty that the country so desperately needs when we contemplate all things energy, whether that be gas, whether that be renewables, whether it be any other form of electricity generation. And what we know has informed higher electricity prices in this country more than anything else is the climate wars and then the policy uncertainty that has followed. Now, what this does for the Liberal Party is it throws yet another completely unique and unprecedented position on their part, largely, to go a completely different way. And what that does, particularly as the alternate government of the nation, is it undermines the very policy certainty that is desired by investors in the market who actually we need to be investing in new supply of energy for our country. And that's a policy mistake. That has a consequence in its own right that is worthy of contemplation.
Well, just on that and just briefly on this one, because I want to move on to the NDIS health battle, but it's been reported or suggested you actually personally wouldn't oppose or wouldn't mind a nuclear power industry in Australia. Is that fair?
No, what I've said, I've been pretty clear about this, is I think nuclear power has a role to play globally. We need to achieve decarbonisation, you know, in international global markets, and in some parts of the world, the economics of nuclear stack up. They are typically parts of the world with huge population bases, with sustained 24/7 industrial demand of a size and scale that is unfamiliar to the Australian context, places like China, for instance. So that's got a role to play. So I believe in the role of nuclear power in decarbonisation globally. In an Australian context, what we know about nuclear power is that every independent and objective analysis that has been done on this question shows that in Australia, nuclear power would actually make electricity more expensive. And on that basis, I oppose it in Australia. Because why would anyone in their right mind support a form of generation that would add to the cost of electricity in this nation rather than help decrease it?
All right.
I think the technology is important, it's got a role to play, but in an Australian context it doesn't stack up.
Now, the last few days, I'm moving on to this now, you've been one of the figures out there making the point in connection with NDIS and health funding. It was reported yesterday premiers are pushing for an emergency national cabinet and are after $30 billion in extra funding. Is that fair and accurate of where we're at?
Look, I won't speak to the numbers. What I would say is that we clearly have a discrepancy between what the Commonwealth believes is appropriate for an investment in public hospitals in our country and what the states know is necessary. The Commonwealth made a commitment, you know, at a national cabinet table to move states towards back towards the 42% funding level of the cost of running our public hospitals. That's the commitment. And what we're actually seeing in basically every jurisdiction around the country is that the Commonwealth's contribution is getting further away from 42% rather than getting closer as they have committed to. And states are worried about it, and South Australia is no exception. And then to add on top of that, Andrew, we've got this challenge where around the country, hospital beds that are there to deliver acute services to the sickest people in the nation are being clogged up with aged care patients who are ready for discharge but can't get discharged because they can't find an aged care bed to go into, which is an area of Commonwealth responsibility. These dual challenges are putting pressure on hospital systems around the nation. That is problematic, and we need to address it. Now, look, I think the federal government, Mark Balla, the Prime Minister, they understand the challenges and the issues. They've got their own perspectives, and I, for one, advocate that we try and negotiate an outcome here that actually realises a resolution sooner rather than later.
And just quickly, do you think there's a chance that Thriving Kids won't get off the ground in July the way things are going?
Look, it's a legitimate policy aspiration on behalf of the federal government, and in South Australia, we do accept that there is a need to reform the NDIS. We do think that there are cohorts of people that have been getting access to the NDIS that don't necessarily have to. The question is, what is the support mechanism for those people in the event they no longer are eligible for the NDIS, or in future generations they don't get access to it? Thriving Kids seeks to address that challenge, but I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done to ensure that the appropriate models of care are in place, that the people that provide those services are actually equipped to be able to do so, because state governments a long time ago gave up that capability and capacity. And then, of course, Andrew, the final element is making sure it's funded properly. And we haven't seen much evidence of that policy work reflecting the need. And of course, and certainly on South Australia's case, we won't be supporting something until we're satisfied that those critical issues are addressed before we sign up to a new arrangement going forward.
Premier Malinauskas, thanks so much for your time.